Well, welcome to Business as Unusual. This is the live stream where we dig into the pressing issues and emerging trends shaping the business landscape. We're going to start in just a few minutes, but if you have questions, please feel free to add them to the chat, and I'm going to try and weave them all in during today's really fun and interactive session. So, I am Kathy Steele, and I'm the CEO of Red Caffeine, and I'm your host today. For those of you unfamiliar with Red Caffeine, we're a growth consultancy. So we build and execute go-to-market plans for ambitious mid-market companies. Our service offering includes a fractional team that is led by a senior level marketing leader that enables a business to scale rapidly without having to hire a wide range of full-time staff members to move their growth plan forward. So today, we're talking about sales with my friend Tom Latourette, who is managing partner at M3 Learning and an incredible sales accelerator. He's working with business leaders and sales teams on improving their selling outcomes. But sales is a really, really big, meaty topic. And so in our work with Red Caffeine, we really think about it as a full scale revenue system because you have to have the right process, tools, technology, and people. But what I love about today's focus is we're going to be leaning into one of the most critical parts of the process. How, as sales professionals, are you positioning yourself as an indispensable partner and really tailoring interactions to meet individual customers' needs? I think everyone that's sort of in a sales position or leading a sales organization or just leading a business today realizes how complex selling in the B2B market has become. And buyers really have easy access to so many options. They do a lot of research before even having a first conversation with a salesperson. So, how do we turn those tables? How do we prepare to have really meaningful conversations, build strong relationships with prospects that are a right fit? So, as I've been calling it, like, no more kissing any frogs. So, this is what we're going to be talking about today. And I'm really thrilled to have Tom with us. Tom, as you know, we're digging in. Why don't you start by introducing yourself and maybe sharing something that's not on your bio?
So, Kathy, first off, I'm just tickled to be part of this conversation. You not only have been a friend and a business mentor of mine for probably the last 15 years, maybe. Um,
Yeah,
and
it's been
so
a
I love this conversation. I love what you do. I think what's so important, and you really touched on it, is boy, those spaces where organizations get sales and marketing in alignment makes all the difference in the world. But as you know, we see so many companies that there's a lot of this happening, right? And
while.
yeah, it's fascinating. But so I've been doing this a long time. I just turned 60, which is like to think about that is crazy for me. But
Congratulations.
yeah,
Big
thank you. Yeah, it's the alternative is not so great, right? And so
exactly.
I am reminded. So when I was about 36, 37 years old, I was a vice president of sales for a vinyl window company. We were a $125 million organization. We had 50 salespeople. I had 5 regional managers, and I was responsible for the sales, and we were killing it 30, 40% growth a year. Great service proposition. We were teed up really well, but we were growing strongly. And one of my regional managers read this book called Proactive Sales Management by this guy, Skip Miller.
Yeah.
So I hired Skip. I so, sadly, Skip Miller passed away about 5 months ago. I know he was actually on the Business as Unusual show, I think probably about a year ago, right, Kathy?
Right. Yeah.
And
Oh my God. One of our most fun. You were on as well. One of our most
yeah,
fun episodes. He's just epic and truly missed.
so he wrote 7 books, but I remember it was 21 years ago. I remember we hired Skip. He's going to come in and he's going to work with my sales management team. So it's myself and my 5 regional managers. And Skip comes in and Skip says, "Hey, everybody, I'm glad to be here. First question I want to ask you guys. You've got all 5 of you are here. who's your best salesperson? And we said, oh, that's Rich Fenlock. Rich was our number one salesperson 3 years in a row. And there was no question. Rich was the guy. He just hit the numbers all the time. Skip goes, great. How do you know Rich is going to hit his goal 12 months from now? And we were like, well, first off, before he even asked that question, he said, why is Rich your best salesperson? And Kathy, you weren't there, but what do you think we told him? Because Rich sells the most, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what your great salespeople do. They sell the most. Skip's next question to us was, great, I get it. But how do you guys know Rich is going to hit his goal 9 months from now? And we were like, well, Rich always hits his goal. That's what Rich does. That's who he is. He's an A player. We don't have to worry about Rich. And Skip goes, I got it. I get it. But let me ask you guys a question. You're at this 2-day program. We're going to be talking about sales management skills. We're going to try to take your organization to the next level. But let me ask you a question. What's Rich doing right now? What's he doing today to make sure he hits his goal 12 months from now? Now, at that point, we were 9 months in, we were 3 months into the year. And Kathy, we couldn't answer that question. As a leadership team, we were spending all of our time with our C players, the people who really needed help. We weren't going to teach Rich anything. Rich was already a great salesperson. And I remember going to the program when we hired Skip. I remember driving there thinking, this guy's going to be so impressed with me as a manager, as a leader of this team, that he's going to want to write a chapter about me in his next book. And make sure you spell my name right. You know, it's not a capital T, it's a small t, the whole thing, right? And we went to the break for the first time, and I looked at one of my regional managers, Mark Hansen, and I said, Mark, we stink. How do we not know this? And what Skip helped me see, I remember it was, and I'm sure you've had these moments in your career where you felt like your mind expanded. That's what Skip brought to me 21 years ago, this space of, oh, there is a science to this. There is a process. This is not something that just happens.
Right.
It's something that we can actually help happen. And Skip helped us see, he helped me see that if I don't understand what the best salesperson in my organization is doing on a daily basis and how they're achieving success, I can't hire more Riches. I can't coach my C players to be like Rich. And the reality is I might lose Rich, because if I had just removed an obstacle or two from Rich, he might grow his sales another 30 or 40%. And he's watching us spend our time with our non-performers. That was a really cool time. And so I've been a coach and a consultant. We worked with Skip for about another 10 years. We grew from a $125 million company to a $500 million company. We got purchased by Fortune Brands. And then for the last 12 years, I've been a consultant of M3's philosophy. And with Skip's passing, we kind of feel like we're a 28-year-old startup that we're trying to make sure, the best way I think to honor my friend and mentor is to teach generations of new sellers and new organizations the philosophies that made a difference for me. Right. And that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years. And I just love this conversation. I love coaching and training salespeople. And so thank you for having me. That's a long answer to your question, but
I mean, I really appreciate you sharing, the transition in leadership. It is, really challenging for any organization in any kind of leadership shift. So I just give you a lot of credit for moving the business forward. And I'm super grateful that Skip's, training and thinking is going to live on beyond Skip. So that's the best.
And it's as sad as it is, it's also an exciting time. It's a time for us to figure out how we can take some of the tested and tried philosophies, but then also add some of the new things that are happening in thought process and in science. And we're in an exciting time in terms of communication and human psychology. It's all kind of coming into this conversation. And so we'll talk about a lot of it today. So
Well, I think, as we were preparing for today, we talked about doing some fun things. We talked
Yeah.
about like talking about first dates and wedding dresses. So let's jump in. Let's but I think, maybe what would be important is to kind of set the table
Yeah.
around what is in the mind of a buyer? Like where are they coming from before we can even decide where we're going to be coming from?
I love that. I love that. So this is this, we almost start every single program we have. I was doing a program probably about 5 or 6 years ago with the folks at Carrier, an HVAC equipment company, and their VP of sales, Bill Walton, uh, used this slide to teach his team. And I love this slide so much. And so, Kathy, I want you to think about when we are new salespeople, we join an organization, we've got very little solution expertise, and we have very little relationship with our customer. These people are order takers. Now, so Kathy, when I ask you to say what an order taker is, what are some examples of order takers?
Yeah. I haven't been to a fast food place in a
Yeah.
while, but a lot of times that's like quick serve comes to mind in that
Yeah.
experience.
They take your order. You tell them what you need, and they take your order. Now, we need order takers. So order takers are very important. But the interesting thing of when we're an order taker, the only thing we can do is just react to what the customer wants, right? Then we learn a little bit more and we become a product seller. We learn a little bit more and we become a solution provider. Now, Kathy, if I had to ask you the difference between a solution provider and an order taker, what would you say? How do I function differently as a solution provider than I would if I was just an order taker?
Yeah, well, I think then you're providing optionality. So
Yeah.
you're helping understand what is important to them, and then how maybe your service product, hamburger
Yeah.
choices would fit their needs.
Let's say I'm an order taker at Starbucks, the barista, and I get your coffee. But now all of a sudden I'm a solution provider and I say, "Hey, you look a little hungry too. Maybe we've got some great baked goods. We've got." All of a sudden I start offering you different choices because I'm starting to understand your needs a little differently. But I
Right.
also know the way that my organization can support you. Now we learn a little bit more, and we then get to this, we add the word consultant on it. So now we are seen as a solution consultant. Kathy, the minute we tack on the word consultant, what happens? What happens with our relationship with the client?
Yeah, I think that they know that they can lean into you because you've got that superior knowledge base. You're going to help them consult through their challenge or business issue.
And wouldn't you agree that a lot of times consultants know as much about our business as we do? Good consultants even know a lot about the industry. They
Right.
actually are guiding us into choices we can take. Out of those four options right now, we're only up to solution consultant. Which person might say, you know what? I don't know if we're the best solution for you. You might want to go with my competitor. Who would say that?
I would say it'd have to be on the consultant side or
That
beyond.
would
No?
be the only person who would probably say that. And,
Oh,
I'll say this to salespeople and I'll go, well, that's kind of crazy. And salespeople go, you're right about that. Why would you say that? And then the question I ask is, yeah, why would you say that? Why would I actually recommend a client go to a competitor? And the word that keeps popping up is trust. Once you trust me, I'm not selling you something. I'm actually providing a solution. I'm helping guide you to the appropriate answer for you, the client. That's how I think like a consultant. Now, the pinnacle of this conversation is how do I become a strategic partner? Now, the minute we say strategic partner, Kathy, how does a strategic partner operate differently than any of these other people?
yeah. The way I think about it from our context is usually they've just got a lot more experience. So they're
Yeah.
really able to see the vision and help articulate or architect a solution based on a little bit broader perspective than just the one little,
There's a
plank.
great scene in Hamilton the musical where Aaron Burr is seeing conversations that are happening in a room that the door is closed and he goes, how do I get in that room? I want to be in the room where it happens.
Remember
The
that.
question I ask salespeople is, your customer is making decisions about 2026, 2027. They're thinking about their growth. They're thinking about expanding. They're thinking about different markets that they need to go into. Out of all of these salespeople, who's the only person who's going to be invited into that room that's having where your client is having a conversation about their future? I think you'd agree the only person who's going to be in there is the strategic partner, right?
Absolutely.
And so you made a great comment. Too many times we think that the only way we can become a strategic partner is through experience. Now, the challenge that I would say to a salesperson is, you just joined the organization. You've only been here for 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
I can't wait. I can't wait 15 years for you to become a strategic partner. But here's what the conversation we're having with people is: how do I operate like a strategic partner, even if I'm only an order taker? How do I operate like a strategic partner in the space of I'm a new employee or I'm just learning this business? And our piece is, we think you can do that because you can ask questions, you can operate differently, which then gives the answer to your question. We have to think how the buyer is thinking. And so Skip used to say two things these are Skip-isms that we use all the time. Most people want to buy, they just don't want to be sold.
Yeah.
And the second thing was, people don't want to be educated, they want to be validated. Strategic partners are all about helping the client validate the choices, understand. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I really felt like that gave me even more pause when we were prepping, because I hadn't quite thought about the validation angle. And it is really, really important to,
Yeah. Yeah.
not feel like you're always bringing somebody along, but you're affirming
Yeah.
that, this is an issue. And you're able to help say, like, we may have the option and be able to solve it for you. You may need somebody else, but let's learn more, I guess, is the way I
And
think about it.
validation, too many times we think about validation just being, oh, me agreeing with somebody. That's not necessarily what good validation is. I mean, it's definitely that space of taking somebody, moving them when they're ready, but also making them aware, which is what great strategic partners do. Hey, are you aware this is what's happening in the industry? Are
Right.
you aware that AI is doing X, that this is happening, these are happening? That's what we need to be doing as really powerful strategic partners today in today's world. We can't just be people who push our product, because we're not going to be in the right conversation. Now, we might still get transactions, we might still get some sales. We're probably just not going to become long-term partners with those clients. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, I think you're spot on.
And
So,
so I think you asked the one conversation I love to have is, we got to think about it like first dates, test drives, and wedding dresses. And so, just if we can show the next slide, I love this slide because it really, what we see happening in today's sales environment is, first, we've got to think about the buyer's journey. What are the stages that they go through their buying process? And so most people, if you think about the first stage, I've got questions. I'm in an initial interest. I don't know what I don't know. And I need to accumulate answers. I need to figure things out. Then I want to be educated. Then there's this space of actual validation. So I've learned something. Now I want to validate what I've learned. Then I'm going to justify what I've learned, and then I'll make a decision. But here's what we see. We see three things that are happening today. We call it the start, the split, and the skip. The first is the start. You mentioned something, Kathy, that's going on. Clients are coming to us so much more educated than they've ever been. And so I'm sure some of the conversations that happen at Red Caffeine, customer picks up the phone, sends an email and says, hey, I've done a bunch of research. Looks like you guys can help us. I'd love to know how you guys are better or different than here's what I'm doing today. How are you better or different than this solution? And they push us into an educational conversation. And so, as salespeople, the
We do.
customer pushes us to education, and we go, great, I can tell you all about how awesome I am. So, our first date is all about us instead of the other person, right? Kathy, if I had to ask you, what are the objectives of a first date? What are the two objectives of a first date if we were having a first date? You know, it's been a long time since I had a first date. I know the same thing for you.
Yes, it's been a
Right?
long time. It's been a long time, but I think about, yeah, I do feel like there needs to be some chemistry. And then I want to feel, if I were thinking about dating, I'd want to feel like we have some matched values, or we share some commonality, and that would be what I would want in a good
So
first
really
date.
those two objectives, I mean, the first one of the object, let's agree the objective, there is never a first date objective of, I want to meet you and we're going to get married tomorrow. Would we
Right,
agree with
right.
that? That is not an objective.
I
But
do
the
like
objective would
not
be
having though.
yeah, maybe it's on a reality TV show, but but one of the objectives would be, I want to see if a second date makes sense for both of us. Does it make sense are you somebody that I'd like to have a second date with? And am I somebody that you'd like to go on a second date with? And the only way to do that is I have to learn as much as I can about you, not spout how great I am. Here's the problem, though, in business. If you were to take a look at the slide decks of most organizations, and you see this all the time in the work you do, those first 10 slides are, hey, here's how long we've been in business, and here's our executive team. Here's our map slide. There's always a map slide, right? That shows.
Yes.
So we have to shift that. We've got to get into true discovery conversations. And then these next pieces, we see a split where there's two languages that are spoken. We'll talk more about that. And then most organizations jump over transfer of ownership, and we'll touch on that too. So I think this slide really just reinforces, one, the stages, but also the three important pieces. First dates are all about discovery. Test drives are all about validation, and then we'll get into the three languages. So unless do you have any other questions about this slide? I think it's just.
I don't know if it's is relating to the slides per se, but I think we always are, whether we're going on a first date or we're going on a first meeting, we need to prepare some things. So like, what are some of the things that you do to prep for that first discovery conversation?
Well, again, it's all about the space of, my objective is I need to learn as much as I can about the other person. And so our recommendation is you do a little bit of research. We call it 3x3 research. I'm gonna look at three things. I'm gonna look at Google. I'm gonna Google you. I'm gonna Google your company. I'm gonna see if you have talked about, posted about things that are important to you, objectives you're trying to fix and solve. I'm gonna take a look at your website to see if you've posted things like that. And then the third thing, I'm gonna look at LinkedIn. And I'm going to see, because LinkedIn has become this business. It's like a repository of what's important to many people. So one, many people will actually say what's important to them on LinkedIn. And the second thing is, you and I might have mutual rapport. We might have people that we know. And so all of a sudden, that space of me becoming known, liked, and trusted, because I think we'd agree the way to become a strategic partner is to establish a level of trust. And if we can establish trust through the people we know and the things we know about other people, all of a sudden that creates a powerful place. So I know a lot of salespeople who will go, oh, well, I want to be spontaneous. I want to pick up the phone and just learn. And you're actually putting yourself at a disservice. And I think the clients, if you go on a call and you actually tell the person that you didn't do research, you didn't take a look at their website, you didn't take a look at their link, I actually would look at you in a diminished state. Like, what, really? You didn't do any of that work? Why did I spend all the time to make my LinkedIn profile look so cool, right?
Well, I think too, even the fact that likely they've done some diligence on you, they've done some
Of
research
course.
on you, they've
Yeah.
looked at your website, or you wouldn't be even in the equation, or they've seen your business in some marketing or
Yeah.
some other brand awareness tool. So I absolutely agree. We're actually using AI to do
Oh, I
a
love
little
it.
more search. It speeds
Yeah.
things up. You can sort of sift through things and go deeper in a certain area too, because it just collects a lot of different resources. So it makes sort of that Google search even more powerful.
So then you do some research, which should point you to issues, problems, challenges. The thing Skip would hammer with me all the time. Anytime we were having a first conversation with somebody, Skip would say, "What's the problem? And what's the size of that problem?" And if I couldn't articulate, if I couldn't say that I had an understanding of the problem or what the size of that problem was, then Skip would say, "Well, you're just pushing product then. You're just pushing sales training. Why don't you understand where they need to go?" And so, our challenge is, where are you today? On a scale of 1 to 10, how comfortable are you where you're at? Did you hit your goals? Are you not hitting your goals?
Right,
Well, we missed them by 20%. Okay, so you're a 2 or a 4. Where do you need to be? Oh, we've got to be here. Great. The work we do is actually helping you close that gap.
right,
And
right,
so, one, you want to find out the problem and the size of the problem. And our biggest recommendation is, in discovery, you ask 3 questions. You ask cause questions, outcome questions, and decision making questions. We call it COD. And so, cause is, what caused you to look at our website? What caused you to pick up the phone? What caused you to take this call? What's happening that you guys need to fix or solve? What's the problem? And what's the size of that problem? Tell me more about that. Where are you on a scale of 1 to 10? Where do you need to be? And how quickly do you need to get there? So, one, we've got to understand the cause before we, blah, 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 let me tell you how great we are, right? The second thing is outcomes, and it's positive outcomes and negative outcomes. So, where do you want to be? And what are the things that you got to make sure definitely don't happen? Um, we're working with a software company, well, logistics, a software company in the logistics space.
okay,
And one of the things that happens, they find out when when they get higher up in the organization, they start understanding the critical risks that are inherent if they don't meet certain criteria based on government regulations. And one of those issues could cost them millions of dollars. So the risk is really high.
right,
And they're an organization that's what they do. They minimize that risk. They make that risk like this. Now, they're more expensive because of that, and so there are certain people in the organization who are going to want you to talk about the nickels instead of the $100 bills that you save. Does that make
right.
sense?
Oh yeah, and I mean, I think that kind of goes back to a couple things that I was thinking about. First of all, you talked a little bit about where somebody has come to you with a need. I mean, there are times where we're getting in front of
Yeah.
prospective customers, and they don't have maybe quite as pressing of a need, or they're in more of that earlier research phase. Is there a way to unpack that in the how you're prepping for this type of a meeting?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And so, the same thing in terms of the research, your knowledge of the industry, you being a strategic partner, you thinking like a consultant, that space of, listen, we work with lots of people at your title. We work with lots of folks in your industry. They're telling us that these are the top 2 or 3 issues that they're running up against. How are you guys doing with those?
Yeah,
How are you addressing those? What's working and what isn't working? Tell me a little bit about those. Are these priorities, or are there other things that are even bigger priorities for you that I haven't even brought up? If I can get into that conversation, then I can say, okay, well, there may or may not be a place where I can help you, but I don't want to tell you about me and my company before I understand if this even makes sense, if it even makes sense for me to have an education conversation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And I think about like, I know a lot of the things that we are recommending is around, first of all, just really understanding who
Yeah.
your ideal customer is and being, having clarity around that for the
Yeah.
sales team so that when you're doing some of that upfront research, it's not always available, some of the financial information, but you can get a fairly decent idea around company size, employee
Yeah.
headcount, those kinds of things are fairly readily available online. I think, it becomes more complex as to understand, unless there's a clear difference in title, like decision makers, like if you're meeting with person X, are they going to be able to write the
Yeah.
check? So like that, I think those are the things that come to mind too, is how do you, they may
I
have
love
a
it.
B.
That's the third piece. The D is the third piece, and so probably the biggest recommendation we make is, um, I think most salespeople will ask a question along the lines of, "Are you the decision maker? Who's the decision maker?" Our belief is, and especially in today's world, you want to ask what's the decision making process in your organization?
Yeah,
Who becomes this really, oh, I'm going to make the decision. It becomes almost this territorial question. But what's the process in this organization? How do you guys make decisions here? What are the teams that are involved? How does that work? Um, we work with some organizations that actually will try to find out how involved their legal department is ahead
right.
of time so that they could actually maybe help marshal this through whatever has to happen in the legals. Again, that's how you think like a strategic partner, right?
Yeah, I absolutely. We were just talking about that internally because it depends on the size of the organization. I mean, we'd done a lot
Yeah.
of work with like Amazon Web Services, and we always knew like we had to get the legal piece starting because they had like a very short timetable on getting this work into market, and we were always delayed if we didn't get in front of legal as
So
soon
that's
as.
why I love like a decision making process question in discovery. That
Yeah,
place. Let's not wait. Let's not wait till we're in proposal. Let's actually have a conversation about how does your team make a decision around here? Who's involved in that? What are the things? I'd like to know that so I can help you actually guide this through your own organization.
yeah.
And
So
a lot you'll hear the spaces where maybe that person will guide it and where you might be able to help them.
I really love that I remember that from our prep session, and it honestly, it's so funny, just happened to us
Yeah,
this week.
right.
So, I, I don't know if we've clearly delved into validation. So I'd love you to tell me a little
Yeah.
bit more about that part of the process.
So typically, the best space to validate is later in the process, right? So, like, I'd like for you to imagine, Kathy, if when have you bought a vehicle in the last 4 or 5 years?
A while, but
Yeah.
I'm thinking about it of
How
late.
successful would I be as a salesperson if I said, "Hey, let's go take a test drive," and I put you in the passenger seat and I said, "Oh, you're going to wait till you feel how this baby handles," and I showed you how the car makes the turns. And how successful would I be if I was the one driving the car and you were the one sitting in the passenger seat?
Yeah, I mean, yes,
So
it's way
where does the client sit in a test drive?
in the driver's seat.
Of course, why is that?
Because you want them to feel, the experience of
Yeah.
working with you, your solution, your technology, whatever, that you want them to, be able to see how your solution, your product might make
So
their
our challenge to sales organizations, if you remember that skip, what
right.
happens we see a lot is a lot of organizations skip. They educate, they talk. So if the way I educate you, if I'm driving the car, I'm educating you. If you're driving the car, you're validating the decisions that you're making.
Right.
The question we ask organizations is, what are your validation steps? What are the things you do to actually allow the client to get it? I don't know if you can see this behind me. Skip used to say, you want to help the client go from I get it to, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
A great example, we were working with a CNC manufacturer. They manufacture $1 million CNC machines. Well, you can't take a test drive on $1 million CNC machine if you're a manufacturing facility. But what you can do is you can see one in action. So this salesperson was extremely successful. And what he would do is he would go, oh, Kathy, you guys are looking at the XP 507. I have a client that has that product. They don't do the same thing you do. But I tell you what, I'll pick up you and your team. We'll drive over there. They're about an hour away. We'll drive over there and I'll show you it in action so you can see the machine in action. And my client has agreed to have you there and he'll walk you through it. So salesperson would drive, he would pick them up, they would talk the whole way there. And then he would introduce the client. He'd say, I'd like you to meet Jim. Jim, meet Kathy. And then he had one job to do. His job was to just keep his mouth shut so that Jim would sell the client on why this machine was fantastic. That's a validation exercise. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think it's honestly so brilliant, especially in those types of applications where you're stepping away and you're using peer influence to help, in that kind of endorsement. It's like you can say, call my testimonial or what have you, but it's way more validating to see it.
Peer endorsement's one of a really powerful validation. A future vision question or is also a one. Like, so, Kathy, you've told me that you need your team to achieve this objective. I'd love for you to think, let's go out 12 months into the future. Actually, it's January 1st, 2025. You've just achieved your goal last year and you've achieved it at a pretty high level. Let's say you were 5% over goal last year. How's the organization operating differently? How are they functioning differently? What are the things that you're doing differently 8 months from now than you are today? Talk me through what that would look like. Well, that's a validation exercise, right?
Exactly. Yeah, you're really helping them think visionary about. Yeah. And we do that a lot. Like, let's write your future press release on how working together could, stolen from Amazon, but it's something they do a lot in their process. But yeah, I think making people see this shared vision and then really hearing them articulate what success looks like is incredible.
And then the last thing I would say is this thing, let's call this the customer pen. It's instead of me writing it down and telling you what those numbers are, I give you the pen, I give you the spreadsheet, and I go, let's put your numbers on this sheet. Let's put your numbers here. What would that look like? Does that make sense? So I actually create exercises that you can do. Now, here's what's great. I can do that in discovery. I can do that in education. I can do that throughout the buyer's journey, and I can always be validating.
Yeah, we just got a question, and I really like it because I think you get the opportunity to be in a room with a lot of different sales professionals as you're consulting. And so what are some of the ways that you can hear from your peers of what is going on in the prospecting environment or the prospecting conversation so that there's honestly like a peer learning forum experience?
So one, I think the organizations that we see successful in this are sharing what they learn in discovery. They're sharing that with not just their marketing team, but they're sharing that with other salespeople. And then all of a sudden, marketing is able to now fine tune the message. Oh, we've heard this from 3 people. All of a sudden, let's say we're focusing in the dental industry or we're focusing in manufacturing. Seems like we're hearing this from some of the larger prospects we're going after. Let's really lean into that. Let's ask more questions about that. Let's find out why everybody's bringing that up. So you actually create an environment where our sales team is actually sharing what they hear at a powerful level. And it's not the salespeople saying, well, we got to do this, we got to do this. It's, listen, here's what the clients are telling me are their most important issues. These are the problems they're trying to solve. And here's what they've told me. They're a 2 here. They need to be an 8. They've got a big gap. And
Right.
we can actually help them close that gap.
Yeah. I mean, I like my mind goes to two places. We actually built something for Microsoft many, many years ago that was around lead, experience sharing, where they were able to, like, in a technology forum, share the, what allowed them to close this particular deal, so that, as you mentioned earlier, that people could learn from a top performer in a place that was very tech enabled, and easy for a global team to access. So how do people integrate that, like, in a smaller or mid-market organization? Is that something that you do in your coaching sessions and then have them sort of
Yeah,
continue
I
on?
think I'll tell you, here's what I think happens a lot of times with our sales teams and our leadership teams. We tend to be transactional in some of the conversations we have. So we get together, but we're talking about transactions, opportunities. Hey, how's this going on this deal? How's it going on this deal? I think the better organizations actually force themselves to have strategic conversations at least once a month, once a quarter, and that's where this information gets shared. What are
Yeah.
we hearing in the field? What are we hearing what are we hearing from the conversations we're having? How many strategic plans have we done with our best customers? What are they telling us where are they telling us they need to get to in 2025, 2026? If we're getting in the room, and that's the problem. If I'm only seen as a transactional partner, if I don't become a consultant or a strategic partner, I'm never going to know what my clients need for the future. I'm always going to be reacting to their needs. My ability to be in that conversation, be in the room where they're having those conversations, creates the difference for me to then bring that information back and guide my whole organization differently.
I mean, I think we find when we're able to collaborate at that level with
Yeah.
our clients too, because then we're not, doing and waiting for a survey to come back, or doing, interviews just at a moment in time. We're actually hearing ongoing feedback from the salespeople that really have the voice of the customer, or customer service people that really have what are the pain points in the market, because they're dealing with it every single day, and that
And
can be a
so,
really powerful way to.
Kathy, one of the things that I'd love to finish this conversation, because it really goes to your question. How do I get into those future-based conversations with my clients, no matter what size they are, whether they're small, mid-size, or large organizations? So if we can go to the last slide. We teach this thing, Skip coined it, above the line and below the line. And so I want you to think about most organizations. Now, small organizations, this might be the same person, okay? But in most organizations, again, I'm going to use the logistics company we were working with. This is they're most of the time they're dealing with the logistics coordinator who wants to know, hey, how am I going to move this stuff from here to here? My client needs it to be moved here. And those are below the line people who are only concerned about the features and benefits of the product services that you're bringing. Now, most of the time, these below the line people think in terms of today. They're probably thinking 0 to 3 months out. They've been told by their boss to do something, and they fulfill those objectives, right? Now, they report to a vice president of transportation. They report to a regional manager. They report to somebody, and that person has really 2 responsibilities. I have to increase the revenue of this organization, or I have to decrease the cost. And that's what I get paid for. Those are the things that I'm responsible for every day. I have a team to do all the stuff that makes that happen.
Right.
Those people traditionally are thinking 6 to 18 months out. They may be thinking about 2025 budgets and schedules, right? And then they report to the C level. And those C level folks are your chief operating officer, your CEO, whatever that looks like, maybe somebody on the board, but they're thinking about market share and market size. Now, a lot of salespeople don't have a problem calling higher in the organization. The problem is they speak the language of features and benefits.
Mhm.
They don't speak the language of increased revenue, decreased cost. They're talking about their stuff instead of what's happening in the organization. And so above the line conversations are really me trying to figure out how are you reducing your risk? What's your issues with return on investment? When you make an investment, what are your expectations of that return? What are the time issues you're struggling with? What are the things that are causing you guys to maybe spend too much time? You've got, a lot of your team efforts are it's productivity issues. What's happening there? Maybe that's a space where we could decrease your cost, but also if you could figure out how to solve that, what else would you have those people do that they're spending their time on, trying to create reports?
Right.
That's where brand comes into play. What's your brand represent? And then there's this really fascinating place. The higher up I get in the organization, now all of a sudden I can help you leverage. I can help you here, but I can also help you here. I can also help you here. Most above the line folks are not thinking about one project. They're thinking about 15 or 20 projects that they have to solve at the same time.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And
Yeah.
so
I love that.
most of the time, Kathy, we see the only time we get above the line people involved is when I go, "Hey, Kathy, I've been talking with your person, Jim, and Jim's fantastic, but hey, we need you to sign off on this project that Jim's working on." The question we like to ask sales teams is, Kathy, has this ever happened to your team? We talked to Bob. Bob loves us. He's all ready to go. We give Bob a price. We give him a proposal. And Bob says, "Kathy, this looks great, but I need to get Mary's approval." Has that ever happened to you?
Oh, yes.
All the time. Typically, Kathy, who has the conversation with Mary?
Well, they have the conversation on your behalf. And,
What's at risk? What's at risk when we let Bob have the conversation with Mary, other than everything?
Pretty much everything, yes.
Everything, right? So the challenge with what we're trying to help sales organizations do is get Mary involved as early as you can. Have a conversation with Mary while you're having a conversation with Bob to understand how you can help Bob, but also how can I help Mary? How does what I'm working on with Bob affect Mary's vision and Mary's things, the opportunities that Mary is trying to fix and solve? How does this project support this project? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think it's amazing. I really feel like that is a challenge that sometimes you think you're talking to a decision maker and it is the 11th hour that somebody comes.
How these people get involved? Yeah, exactly.
And how do these people get in our room? But I don't know that we completely articulated the say yes to the dress analogy, but I do have some.
Great way to end. It's a great way to end. Yeah.
Yeah.
So have you ever seen the show Say Yes to the Dress?
Of course.
Okay. So there's this wonderful moment. If you haven't seen it and you're on this live stream and you haven't seen it, it's a reality TV show where a bride to be is going to choose the dress for her wedding. And that wedding is 12, 18, 2 years from now, right, Kathy? And so you've seen the show. They start off every segment. The bride says something like, "Oh my God, John he's dreamy. I love John so much. He's a great golfer. I love him. He loves wine. He loves bourbon. Oh, John is the best. I can't wait to be married to John. I've got a $5,000 budget for the dress, but oh my gosh, we're going to have a fantastic wedding. We're doing a Lord of the Rings thing. We're going to be in the forest. We've got elves. We've got, oh my gosh, lute players. It's going to be great." Kathy, you've seen the show, but what percentage of time does the bride go over budget in her dress purchase?
Oh gosh, I don't know if it's percentage, but I would have to say it's a high 80% or
Almost
more.
all the time. What's
Yeah.
the physical thing that happens that has the bride go over budget every single time?
They get that dress on and they imagine.
She puts the dress on.
Yeah.
So the test drive, the dress. Now, how do you help your client see the future that they are looking at, the space where they are solving their problem? You're helping them solve that problem, but you're putting them into that dress.
Yeah.
I know a lot of folks here are going to go, yeah, but I'm a service-based company. I don't know how, I don't sell a product. You sell a solution though. And the space, that's why discovery is so important. I have to find out why. What problem are you trying to fix? What problem are you trying to solve? The best sales conversation is not where you go, oh, I told them this and I told them this and I told them this. The best sales conversation is they got it. They
Me.
understand how, and you could literally say, well, that's what we do, Kathy. We help organizations like yours get to their wedding day, and they don't have to worry about anything anymore. That's what we do. And we've helped hundreds of companies do the same thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I really love that analogy, because I do feel like that it's a tool we use in our process for somebody, because sometimes it takes a while to
Oh,
do
yeah.
some of the things to establish really a go-to-market plan and all the pieces and parts. So if you can create that shared vision of what it could look like
Yeah.
in 6 or 12 months, it is really a powerful moment.
Plus, I think the energy that you create when you find out the problem and the size of the problem. Most sales cycles are 2, 4, 8 months. Many times, I'm sure you see this, you have to remind the client why you're in this conversation in the first place. We've been working on this for 4 months. Let's remember why we're doing this in the first place. You needed to fix this. You needed to solve this. This is a huge issue for your organization. You guys are here. You need to be here. That's why we're working so hard on making this happen. I think that's the energy you, as a strategic partner, are going to keep bringing to every conversation.
Yeah. Well, I have like 50 more questions, but I'm going to ask just a couple of things around what are some of the things that, in terms of resources or daily or weekly habits, that you recommend people think about?
Boy, it's a great question. I mean, one, I think if you are not doing work up here in your own emotional intelligence, if you have not done psychological studies, all of that, if you're not figuring out the psychology of why people buy, how to communicate better, if I was going to focus anywhere, I would tell a young salesperson, do the work up here, understand how you're wired, listen to people like Adam Grant, people who are thought leaders in the way that people think. That's the first thing. The second thing is become a student of the tools that you have. LinkedIn is probably one of the most powerful tools that are out there, and I still see people who don't know how to use it.
Yeah.
Figure out how to use LinkedIn so that you can become known, liked, and trusted quickly. How I can create relationships before I've even had a first conversation.
Yeah.
And there's some powerful ways. And then I would just become a voracious reader or listener to podcasts.
Totally.
Read as many books as you can and just fill your head, instead of listening to sports radio, fill your head with people that are talking about this. The other thing I would say is, you want to become a strategic partner, go to association events. Hear what people in your business, in your industry, hear what they're talking about, hear what they're making presentations about, because those are the issues that they're struggling with.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I knew the time would go quickly. It always does, but
Already, how did 50? Well, I tend to tell way too many stories, so I
well,
apologize.
no, I think that the stories really help people see, the real case scenarios that we get faced with. And there's just so many layers to sales today. So I do think
Yeah.
the storytelling helps it seem, realistic and real. But I always want to start by thanking you, as well as M3 Learning, for being a sponsor. But if anybody wants to reach out to Tom, we've shared his contact information. Reach out to him on LinkedIn and tell him what you think about his profile and how he's doing on LinkedIn, since he's saying
Yeah,
it's such.
let's connect on LinkedIn and we'll get to know each other, right? Yeah.
But thank you again. It just was incredible to have
Thank
you
you, Kathy.
today. We also want to thank our sponsor, HR Source, and they are an association for employers, and they really help manage HR needs efficiently and economically. So coming up in June, we have a really exciting topic that I'm, absolutely thrilled to talk about. And we are going to be featuring Ramo Pachetti, who is the VP of Corporate Development at Bowler Company, along with our very own Amy Anderson, who is our VP of Client Services. And we're going to be talking about growing businesses through acquisition. I would assume, Tom, you're even hearing a lot of traction where businesses are really thinking differently about growth today. And so we're going to dive into, what are the various options of acquisition planning, and really what is the difference between PE firms, VC, strategic buyers, family office. We're going to talk about the complexities and the opportunities in selling or expanding your own business. So if you are somebody that's thinking about your succession, we'll talk a lot about that. We're going to learn some, really interesting strategies for maintaining growth from the initial evaluation process. So what can you do in the diligence process before you make an acquisition? And then what can be the things to, have ready to go post that merger transaction? And then, what is the role of your brand and your product architecture? We've been going through this with a lot of clients. We're going to be sharing our experience with Bowler, but what are some of the considerations that you should be thinking about into how to incorporate these brands in your go-to-market moving forward? So it's really going to be a cool topic. Lot of stuff going on in the M&A space today. So we are thrilled to
And
talk.
Kathy, I think you'd agree that one thing we see so many times is if I'm thinking about selling or a merger or an acquisition, we really should be talking to some key professionals 3 or 4 years before we actually want to do that, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've been both, involved in some of the, pre-buying and selling activities, and it is a really, really complex process. But I think what doesn't happen is there's not a lot of thought about post the acquisition or transaction, and what really is going to happen to business there. I think there's a lot of things that you can do to help improve those outcomes so that there's speed to market, and then you're really getting that value out of, the asset that you acquired. Really, on a completely different note, I am going to just highlight an event that we're doing here in the Chicagoland area that I will be appearing at a lunch and learn for a local association, the Valley Industrial Association, and we're going to be talking about AI. And so I'm going to be sharing, how does AI get integrated into your sales strategy, and, why you should be thinking about this, how can it optimize some of the efficiencies? How can it, I know it sounds crazy, but how can it personalize some of the experiences? And then what are some of the competitive advantages that AI can give to your organization? So really excited about that event coming up in a couple of weeks. And you don't have to be a member or a manufacturer to attend. There is an availability to attend for anybody in the marketplace, because I think this is a topic that is affecting all businesses today. And with that, I am going to close out. Again, Tom, thank you so much. Thank you to our audience.
Pleasure. This was great. Thank you so much for having me part of this.
Absolutely. Well, we could talk for hours, and we will. I'm sure we've got some things coming up that we're going to be sharing ideas, but we're really hoping the audience can lean into some of the ideas and things that we shared today so that it does help you think differently about your sales approach. And as Tom mentioned, I really feel like, this is something that we really value is growing in a business, you have to be open to new approaches, learning new things. So we really encourage you to consider the challenges you've been facing in your sales process and integrate some of the ideas on how to have a powerful first date, and leading to some, more fruitful partnerships and not just having a one night stand. So if you have more questions, as we mentioned, please reach out to Tom or anybody on the Red Caffeine team. We really want to continue to challenge the usual and pursue innovative business solutions. So until next time, keep building badass businesses that people want to work for and with.